Transporte, edição especial virtual. Realização e promoção. Patrocínio. Apoio. Apoio institucional. Parceria. Parceiros de mídia. Assessoria de imprensa. A logística e a transformação digital integrando negócios.
Hello, welcome to yet another day of technical program of our special edition 15 Years of Expolog. A virtual greeting to our audience in Ceará, Brazil, and the rest of the world watching the International Logistics Seminar. And now in 2020, the main theme is logistics and digital transformation integrating business. And now you may watch panel 4 called Challenges in Road Transportation Multimodal Terminals. Here are our speakers. Hello, welcome to yet another panel from Expolog. We are continuing with the event. On behalf of Expolog, I'd like to welcome everyone. In this panel, our main topic is the challenges of road transportation and multimodal integration. We'll have the great pleasure here of having the participation of our speakers. We'll have with us André Sousa Ramos, Regulations Manager for Road Transportation, Multimodal Cargo. Also, a talk from Jonny Oliveira from SEBRAE, Ceará, working in the city of Fortaleza. And also, a talk from Itaiguá, the President of the Board for the Trade Union of Cargo Transportation in the state of São Paulo, and new business manager at Transporte. So, of course, this is an extremely important topic in our panel, and I'm sure that the relevance of this topic and the presentations, the talks, will be extremely important for everyone who is participating and watching us. And so, without any further ado, I'd like to pass the floor to our first speaker, André Sousa Ramos, who's going to talk to us, share with us, actually, information and knowledge. André, welcome. You have the floor. Go ahead. Thank you very much, Marcos, and thank you very much to Jonny César as well, Itaiguara. I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation on behalf of our General Director at ANTT, the Superintendent for Road Transportation Services, Rosimeire Freitas, and also I'd like to thank Expolog for the invitation to be able to share my knowledge and experience with all of you. In this 15 years of the existence of Expolog. And all of the procedures being adopted, CIOT, Operation Identification Code for Transportation. I'm going to share my screen, if you will. And I'll have a quick presentation regarding this topic. So starting with SEOCI, this digital system, I'm going to talk about SEOCI, so let's get to it. And so there is a law that I'm sure most of you know, establishes that economic activities need to be made by private corporations through the national registration of cargo freight forwarders. Of course, there are different categories and different companies, and also a cooperative, the possibility of including cooperatives. Now, the regulation with this resolution from 2015 that regulates procedures and other necessary provisions. And so in 2020, at the beginning of the year really, we had a slight modification in the resolution with the idea of legally providing the implementation of a digital system. So this is something extra to Article 14. The possibility that cargo transportation vehicles, this could also be done through a consultation process or through other electronic means made available by the agency within the resolution. And since it's digital, there is another option in order to register. In the beginning of this digital registry, we tried to do this through federations and other entities. Different road and cargo transportation agencies. And so there is this option to be able to register, but this created some costs and difficulties. And we've been working to try and implement a system that could be expedited, automatic, and be done online with a real paradigm shift, a new mindset, if you will, for the government. And so the registry can all be done online to simplify the registration process and to enhance the efficiency. And the idea is that the registry and fleet management can all be done online, and even you don't have to go to a physical place in order to receive service. Of course, only if you want to do it online, but we'll continue with face-to-face service. And so in the system, it's also possible to lease vehicles. And so not always, as we know, vehicles belong to that company that is registered. And so through such a contract, this is possible. And also through the system, now the registry, absolutely no costs involved. There's a step-by-step how to use the system on our website. also the implementation in August. So not everybody knows about these possibilities, and we're waiting for many to come on board. There's no need, this is another point related to the new guidelines, there's no need to use any documents, to submit any documents. It is all connected with the databases of the different government agencies. And so the register, contrary to what used to happen in the past, it's all immediate. After you register digitally, everything is facilitated and the process is expedited. And it's done. Now, regarding the identification code known as SIOT, this identification code actually came from another law that says that a payment to autonomous transportation companies needs to be done through the national payment system in a checking account or a savings account or other types of accounts. And so what was the idea at the time? In order to control these payments through one of these payment methods and a way to enforce this, there is a register of this operation, and then you receive a code. This code is an operation identification code. And so that you need to register the operation. And receive the respective code, identifying code of the operation. Now, with a new public policy, because of the 2018 truck driver strike, a new law was passed in 2018 and states that all cargo transportation needs to be accompanied by a new type of documentation, origin, destination, payment method, and how much was paid. The idea is that we could do enforcement and inspection of the minimum amount that's paid to transportation companies. And so it's a document that has to do with the freight contract. Now, this document should be registered according to the regulation. And so with these new provisions, the agency did not have available other management means. And at the moment is this operation identification code, an expansion of SIOT. So SIOT for all. Now, this is with a new resolution from 2019 that says that the provisions that deal with the registration of operations in SIOT would apply to all. The provisions only show payment methods, and the registration would be done through IPEPs, as they are known, or through integration of the systems. Now, in order to register, the agency requires a lot of information, name, CPF, CNPJ, address, anyway, a series of information that the agency requires. in order to pay, and this was in 2019, applied to all freight forwarders or transportation companies. Now, with the pandemic and different things that were done in order to minimize the impacts, the negative impacts, there was a suspension of SEOCHI for all, and only remaining for autonomous freight forwarders. And the same provision says that NTT later on will establish a new term, a new deadline, in order to adapt to the new legislation so that all interested parties could make their necessary adjustments to the system in order to comply with this new standard. Now, considering this today, the suspension of fines or other the suspension is for those that didn't fit into this article. And to establish new deadlines and the applicability of these new provisions. Now, considering all of this, the agency started to study alternative means that could have create less impact in the market. There is a concern, at least technically speaking, that cargo transportation, road transportation, needs to have minimum intervention. So, of course, legislators present some situations where the agency needs to comply with payment of freight or the national policy for minimum prices charged. And so to minimize the impacts created in the market, the agency was able, through dialogue and constant partnerships, the Secretariat of Finance, to study that SEOCHI could be replaced in the future with the information that we have in NEFIE, the manifest document. So a proposal that's being studied. And so the idea would be a whole digital document infrastructure that could be utilized in order to simplify the documents needed for road transportation, integration through a digital system that could allow so that SEOCHI could be generated with information that you have in the electronic manifest. And so all of this information are part of an attempt from the Secretariat. So anyway, this is a proposal that's being studied, that we're thinking about. And as a regulation manager, I'm totally in favor of this, and we hope that this will continue. Not the way that it was initially thought of, but perhaps through the FIE, which is a document that's already widely used by companies and freight forwarders, and would be less bureaucracy, less red tape that companies would have to worry about. And so this is where I'd like to stop, and I'm here available. You can get in touch with me. This is my contact information, as you can see here on the slide. Okay, so thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to share all of this knowledge with you, and I'm at your full disposal, to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you. Right, André, thank you very much for your presentation. I would like now to ask you two quick questions, if you will. One actually has to do with SEOCHI. And these digital documents, the time when they were implemented, there was a lot of controversy, heavy criticism, instead of being a proposal that could make things easier, but perhaps it was creating more bureaucracy. And so what were the initial impacts? I mean, how do you evaluate today the rolling out of these two systems? I mean, is there an assessment, an evaluation? If things are easier, if the lives of freight forwarders have been simplified, yeah. I mean, of course, in the context of the truck drivers' strike in 2018, considering the context at the time, many people were caught off guard, and what we had at the time was CIOCHI. So expand the use of the Operation Identification Code for transportation. Now, as time went by, we evaluated this experience, and the agency was able to identify through technical cooperation agreements the use of these mechanisms, the electronic manifest and electronic documents. And this is a document that's widely used by freight forwarders, and the use has been expanding. And by sharing the information, we would reduce one more document, cutting down on the red tape to try and simplify. You talked about NDFE. Can we have some details about what's being done? Well, it's a way to provide more knowledge about transportation and invoices. I mean, these are documents that are already issued by transportation companies, operators, freight forwarders from north to south, And so it's just something that would add to these documents. And so we already have all of the information that's necessary for enforcement or inspection, for example. For example, there are 54 antennas in Brazil that help with enforcement and inspection. So it's all really done electronically. Now, what was missing is the sharing of this information. Between the different finance agencies and the regulating agency. After a lot of dialogue, a lot of convincing, we were able to provide a technical document and provide some information for the agency and receive authorization so that we could access the information and do our enforcement without the need to include a new document and add more bureaucracy. Right, perfect. Thank you so much for your participation on behalf of all those that are participating in this panel. So thank you so much for that. Thank you for all of the information, all of the knowledge. And let's continue with the panel. And now we pass the floor to our next speaker, Jonny César Oliveira, who works at SEBRAE Ceará in the city of Fortaleza, who's going to talk about the challenges of business logistics for small-scale enterprises, small businesses. Welcome, you have the floor. Yes, thank you very much, Marcos. My greetings to all those of you that are listening to us. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And you know how important, how relevant it is for us to look at logistics in Brazil, a continental country, and we have so many operational difficulties in logistics, difficulties representing SEBRAE. We're going to talk a little bit about small enterprises and how they are related to the logistics chain and how you can prepare and develop to face these new challenges. So I'd like to start by talking a little bit about the numbers of small-scale enterprises, small businesses in Brazil. So it's that category that's known as the simple businesses, micro companies, and small-sized enterprises. These are the companies that you can have a maximum limit in revenue, 4 million a year. And so, just to have an idea, 99% of all companies in Brazil are micro and small-scale enterprises. Okay, so we really see how relevant small businesses are in Brazil. They employ more than 50% of our labor, and almost 50% of the GDP is linked to small companies. Now, just to have an idea, small businesses linked to transportation, I checked, just to have an idea, only road cargo transportation and transportation of hazardous goods in Brazil, more than 218,000 companies that are registered in this category. It's very, very relevant. Only here in Ceará, we have more than 3,200 companies registered, so a very strong activity. And what do small companies, what's the quality that small-sized enterprises have in relationship to larger companies? Advantages. You may be asking, yeah, but what advantages can a small company have vis-a-vis a large company? You know, you don't have a large fleet, you don't have so many staff. So how can this company be stronger, let's say? Now, if we were to compare a Mack truck versus a tiny car, of course, the Mack truck is very robust, very resistant, but it's not so versatile. You know, to back up in a Mack truck is difficult. To maneuver, to park, to quickly change your direction, it's not so easy with a huge truck. A tiny car, you can change direction quick, you can back up quickly, you can handle it easier. So that's an analogy that I like to use to talk about these advantages. You know, important strategic changes in a large company, you have to be approved by the board, etc. In a small company, you just knock on the president's door, which is the owner, you check, you decide, and it's quick. And so that's an interesting attribute that we need to highlight. And something else is their importance within the Brazilian logistics ecosystem, especially in Ceará. What do I mean by this? Imagine that all major companies, it's as if it was a huge star or a sun, and around we have planets that orbit around in a large company. A large company doesn't function by itself around it. There are smaller companies. And so let's think about a large company, regardless of being logistics or not, but they need suppliers, they need service providers for maintenance, etc. All of them, most of them, small companies orbiting around a larger one. And this is where I call the attention of small companies related to transportation. Pay attention where you are within your ecosystem. Who are your clients? Who are your potential large clients? A large distributor, a large factory, a company that you think, can I provide a service to this company? That's great, but how? How can I provide my services? How? If I'm a small company, I'm irrelevant. No, you're not irrelevant. Now, you need to be organized. And then we start the challenge for small businesses, which is organization. So if on the one hand, they have quick decision making, everything is centralized, and the owner or a couple of partners, and sometimes they're not so organized. The large companies, usually they have a list of suppliers. You can't only work with a couple of suppliers. It's a bank of suppliers, so that when they need, they won't have problems or have gaps in their supply. And in order for you to register as a supplier, you need to be organized. What do I mean by organized? You have to have, all your documentation needs to be okay. If you're a transportation company, how is your fleet? Is your fleet adequate? Are you in compliance with all of the regulation? Not only be organized, but keep yourself organized. I'm going to do all of this just to register as a supplier for a large company. When you register, okay, but when they work with you, you need to have everything organized, everything regular. So it's important that small businesses pay attention to this. How can I be part of this ecosystem, logistics, where I am in my city, my state, or perhaps even my country? And when we talk about organization, that can be very positive. How can this be positive? If you're organized, everything is okay, your structure is okay, everything is working okay, this will facilitate things for you to have access to credit, for example. That's a major challenge for small businesses. Approximately, almost 80% of small businesses that request credit during the pandemic didn't obtain this credit. Credit, it's difficult to have access. It's not so easy. That's true. But why some got credit and others didn't? Some are more organized. Planning, organized cash flow, everything working well. So we cannot forget the operational side of this, but we also need to pay attention to the administrative side. How is the organization? How is my cash flow, my forecasts? You know, when you go to a bank or a credit cooperative and you request credit, you need to say, you know, what's your estimate to recover this credit? How is your invoicing? What are your revenue forecasts for the next few months or for the year? So this is useful even to plan your future. You know, 6 months from now, a month from now, or 5 years from now, you need to have a plan. And so, for example, I want to expand to start working in other states. All right, that's great. Or no, maybe I don't have to go to another state, but I want to increase my market share. I want to have more clients. Okay. So now, if you don't have a direction to go to, you won't be able to develop anything focused on what you want to obtain. Okay. Now, another interesting point that we need to pay attention to, and I'll give you a couple of tips for small businesses, especially in logistics. One, we need to have indicators like KPIs. We need to have indicators. Another road example, imagine that you hire a truck to ship your products, and then you talk to the truck driver or the company, and you see that the truck, there's no panel or dashboard. You know, the pedals, etc. There's no dashboard. You don't know how the fuel is going. There's nothing. And then you look at the truck driver or the company owner and you say, yeah, but hold on. You don't have a dashboard for your trucks. How do you know that you're not speeding? How do you know that the engine is not overheating? And then the person says, but I have the feeling, I know when that happens. Would you trust that? I think I'm going at 80 kilometers an hour. You think, but I think I still have fuel left. You think. It doesn't make sense, It's incredible. Many small businesses nowadays manage their indicators by just thinking. I think this month I made money. I think we'll be able to pay people this month. I think next month we'll be able to make more money. We need indicators, okay? And this is a challenge because small business owners focus on operational issues. They like to do that, but we need to pay attention to management, finance management, logistics management, and client management. And so it's very important to have our indicators. How is our revenue? And so when do I make more money, less money? Will I need a loan? If you have cash flow, you'll be able to say that in 4 months from now, I won't have enough cash to pay my suppliers, for example. So 4 months beforehand, if you can see that, then you can plan accordingly. A campaign to increase our revenue and have more resources. Or if you go to a bank to obtain credit, a loan for what's going to happen 4 months from now, it's better than to reach the bank asking for credit for tomorrow, because you'll have better interest rates if you plan more. And so remember that companies, especially small businesses, they don't have losses. They go bankrupt because there's lack of liquidity. I'm going to receive a payment 30 days from now, 100,000 reais, 30 days from now. But I have to pay a supplier and my workers 50,000, but I have to pay in 15 days. So this lack of control, organization, and liquidity is what makes things complicated for small businesses. And then you have to obtain loans, overdraft at the bank, and you pay interest. And that just doesn't help. So that's an interesting point. Another important tip that we need to pay attention to, you need to plan your fleet, optimize, be more lean. Vehicles that are idle, that means you're losing money. So how can you optimize? No downtime. I need to have my own fleet. Can I outsource? If I have a smaller fleet and you have a greater demand, can I outsource? So, you have to study all of this in order to optimize. And also costs. Costs are just like our nails. You have to clip them. You have to cut them. And so you need to optimize, and you need to have the right resources with less. And so all clients give us free consulting when they say, look, I didn't like this. This wasn't good. I wasn't satisfied with this or with that. Sometimes we get bothered. We don't like this. We say, this is an annoying client. But really, it's free consulting. Sometimes companies pay so much for a consultant to tell us what's wrong. And a client can tell us that for free. So we need to listen to our clients so we can correct. Good clients are those that complain, because at least they tell you why things aren't going well. Bad clients are those that don't say anything and they just simply disappear. It's good that we have clients that complain because they actually want us to improve. Now, pay attention to suppliers. And like major companies that we talked about, it's important for us to register to be their suppliers. Who's going to do maintenance on my fleet? Anyway, we have important suppliers, and we need to know who they are. Do I have the best supplier? Can I have the same quality with better payment terms, for example? Can I negotiate? This whole story of liquidity. I always pay suppliers in 15 days. But if I find one that offers the same thing, but 20 or 25 days as a payment term. So that could be interesting. And it's important to have a wide range of suppliers. If those that do maintenance on your fleet, if there's a problem, let's say the company went bankrupt. you already have someone else. You have a plan B. You have a backup supplier. So it's important for us to know this, to map what are the suppliers that can help us in a time of need. Also, training the team, which is very important. All the technical part, regulation, client service, maintenance, everything that they need to know. This training needs to be done constantly. A team that's motivated, that understands what they're doing, and that are committed with the results of the company, that really believe that if the company grows, they will grow together. It's this kind of person that we want in our company. And small business owners have a major challenge, amongst other challenges. But when you look at a large company, you see a financial director, operations director, a marketing director, etc. At a small business, a small company, usually all of these directors are one person, which is the owner or perhaps the business partners. And you can't do everything yourself. So you need to seek information. You need to always have people around you that can help you. So where can I seek more information? How can I develop more? Seek this kind of information. Events like this one, Expolog, it's an excellent way to obtain information, to do networking, find out about trends. That's what you need to do. If you're watching us now, for sure, you're one step ahead. You could be doing anything else now, but you're here watching us, listening to me and other speakers, and that shows that you want different results. And like Einstein used to say, you can't obtain different results by doing the same thing over and over. And so it's with that quote from Einstein that I'm going to stop here. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And I'm here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Expolog. Yes, thank you, Jonny Sousa. Excellent presentation, especially because it's especially for small business owners, those that believe that just because you're small, it doesn't mean you're irrelevant. Look how much small and micro businesses contribute to the Brazilian GDP. And it's exactly based on that I think we could ask something. Everything that was said here, we can summarize by saying that size is not everything. It doesn't mean that a company is not professional. Much on the contrary, we can really say that regardless of the size, what prevails is professionalism. Yeah, exactly. That's it. Size is not all. What's important is, regardless of your company size, how you professionalize yourself, how you see yourself. We find many business owners that are afraid of growth or afraid of professionalism. I don't have to develop myself. Things are good the way they are. I don't need to do more. There are many business owners, even if they're small, they think big, they aim high, they always seek more training, capacity building. They never relax, they never coast. They try to understand their costs, see new suppliers, seek new clients. Small businesses represent a lot of the logistics chain. So how many small businesses are part of this supply chain? If you deal with parts or uniforms, or perhaps you provide drivers or maintenance services, or you rent vehicles or resale. Anyway, full of small businesses. And what are the ones that are going to survive? Unfortunately, the market is quite cruel. This pandemic, many companies died. Many shut their doors. Why some died and some didn't? It could be financial issues, perhaps. But many small businesses, if we look, none of them should remain open, but many are still open. They don't have a lot of financial power, but what do they have? Planning, control, and a willingness to do things different. So if you understand this challenge, you may survive. At least you'll have better chances. Yeah, for sure. And we need to consider electronic tools, the internet, social network, or social media helps with access to information, to disseminate your services, also access to the purchase of inputs or raw materials, uniforms, what have you. Today, small business owners have many resources available through social media and online. And of course, it's not so easy, but you can save a lot on costs. Of course, when we look at technology, it's really exciting to see what's going on within Brazilian logistics or even in the world. I mean, we see startups looking at logistics and transportation, trying to develop new things. We have many successful cases. CargoX, for example, they created a freight Uber solution. And they've done this to optimize. Jonny is going to Salvador with a truck full. In Salvador, does somebody need freight to Fortaleza? So you can come and go, optimizing your trip. And so that optimizes Internet of Things with autonomous vehicles, for example, or IoT, where the engine will already get in touch with the mechanic saying what's wrong and what parts are needed. And so continuous improvement in communication through apps and better communication. And so we need to be connected. We need to understand what are the new market trends, especially in technology. It's not something that just helps you stand out. It's needed in order for you to survive. Now, you talked about small entrepreneurs seeking support. In this case, even for transportation, which is an activity that seems to be quite specific, but SEBRAE can provide the support, right? Yes, for sure. We help all kinds of micro and small size companies, even in transportation. So if you want to call us, we have an 0800 number, toll free. You can call from any place in Brazil, wherever you are in Brazil, with this toll free number. You talk to us at SEBRAE. We have SETCPB, specialist in transportation, regardless of your company size. And of course, a lot more information that we can provide. Information is more and more accessible, but it's up to us to look for this support, this guidance. How can I size my fleet? What's the criteria that I use to understand my costs? How can I plan pricing, sales prices, in order to become more professional? All of this is not just for large companies. This is for anyone that has a business and needs to plan. This could make the difference between success or failure. Yeah, just a quick comment, what Jonny mentioned. And so in cargo transportation, the many requirements that are made, and I see this a lot, but the problem really, perhaps one of the problems, is the lack of financial education. We see that a lot. For example, a lot of requests we receive here to have regulation, and a policy, minimum values to know the costs. Basically is linked. All of this is linked to a lack of financial education, a lack of knowledge on how to manage your business, because autonomous business owners aren't so used to doing this, It's as if, you're a micro company yourself. And we need to look at it this way, I think. Yeah, right. Jonny Sousa, thank you very much for your talk. On behalf of Expolog, we'd like to thank you so much. And let's continue with our panel. Now passing the floor over to Pariguarello, who's part of the SETCPB board and also director of Braspress Company. Now he's going to talk to us about multimodality and logistics. Itaiguara, welcome. You have the floor.
Hello, everyone. It's with great joy that I'm participating in this panel at Expolog. I'd like to begin by greeting Clovis, my great friend Clovis. Congratulations for the initiative. New times, right, Mr. President? Everything virtual, but always sharing very important content for our industry, for the business community, and all those that are interested. Congratulations. I know this is a great challenge, but there you are, Expolog, playing its very important role and doing what you promised to do since last year. Congratulations for the initiative. I'd like to greet my other colleagues here in the panel. This very interesting conversation. We're going to talk a little bit about the challenges, the multimodal integration between all modes of transportation. It's a fact that in Brazil, we have a very deficient infrastructure. We also have the option that we opted for road transportation. Not only Brazil, planet Earth, human beings always opt for transportation on wheels, especially when products for consumption in the whole world, you see a major level of transportation by roads and highways. So at least many times a year we travel by road. Of course, not this year, an exceptional year with the pandemic and COVID-19. This was the only year where we didn't do international missions, but every year we travel abroad trying to look for trends, to know a little bit more about how road cargo transportation functions in the whole world, and to try and bring this to Brazil and try to improve the situation we have in Brazil. We usually have an inside joke that we talk about highways. In Brazil, we have two types of highways. We have highways that you just can't drive on, and those that are just unfeasible because of the high costs, because of the tolls. It doesn't mean that we do not support privatization of infrastructure. The way to improve infrastructure really is through privatization, but we discuss a lot. We debate in all levels of government privatization and charging of tolls that be more balanced with legal security for operators in order to obtain the results in terms of what they invested in, a return on their investment, and all costs that they have in maintenance and operation of these highways. But balance tariffs so that cargo transportation can be more efficient and more affordable. Now, cargo transportation is going through a
profound transformation. Logistics and cargo transportation is extremely important. I'll give you some examples of the future logistics and cargo transportation. The first, in health, for example. As we've been following in the news, the importance of having a strengthened health sector. And this brings about greater security in all senses of the word, even in the business sense, for the whole world, really, and Brazil. Another important sector is this sector that's making all of this possible here, technology and innovation in telecommunications, a very important industry, and an industry or sector that's extremely important is transportation and logistics. Transportation and logistics is a very important industry. The latest technological curve made by smartphones that really changed our lives, changed our concept of how people interact, the concept of how companies interact also with people, and vice versa, how people consume products and services, and how they're able to communicate better. And in my opinion, the next technological curve will be in the mobility sector, passengers and cargo. So I see a wonderful future, a promising future for our industry. And of course, we sometimes criticize the way that freight forwarders or transportation companies hire. We need to change this concept. The business community don't have to really just think about trucks. They need to think about transportation and logistics solutions. They need to understand the needs in order to provide better operations with multimodality. And multimodality is extremely important so that the sector can provide a more efficient service and in a proper cost. And so multimodality is extremely important. And of course, infrastructure needs to follow this. We need urgently to do national logistics plan that's more efficient with short, mid, and long-term targets. We need logistics planning. And first, of course, we need to know everything that's happening abroad, but we also need to understand our type of production and our type of consumption so that we can adapt logistics for these specific characteristics. We go abroad to look for trends and best practices. Each mode of transportation plays a different role depending on production or the type of product or the characteristics of the operation. So what does this all mean? Well, a truck, for example, in the whole world, and in Brazil it should be used for the first mile, the last mile, and midterm distances with mid to high added value products. That's what makes road transportation more efficient and worth it. And all equipment from all modes of transportation, trucks, trains, ships, and planes, are the types of equipment that need to be used, because any type of equipment that's idle, that's a loss. And so we need to create infrastructure so all of this equipment can be operated in a higher frequency, if you will. How would this work? For example, we have a sector that we need to support, which is agribusiness. Agribusiness in Brazil is one of the major industries that maintain our growth. So agribusiness produces a product, a raw material, most of the times raw material with very low added value. So they have a limited capacity to remunerate logistics operation. They need a lot of efficiency. So what would be the dream if logistics efficiency? The truck picks up at the farm, takes this to a multimodal terminal. They would unload at a silo, so a perfect connection. They unload in a silo, and they go back to the farm and they come back. They go and they come back. They do this constantly. These grains are all stored, or other types of raw materials are stored in this multimodal terminal. Then a train arrives. Then you load these grains directly from the silo or other storage facilities directly into the train, and the train goes to the port. Once at the port, unloads in a silo. This product remains in the silo waiting for the arrival of the ship, and the train also goes back and comes back, goes back and comes back, and when the ship comes, they load the grains into the ship. This can be done with containers. This can be done with bulk cargo, liquid bulk, a huge variety of products. And so that's what trucks would do. Trucks, of course, play the important role of interconnecting the modes of transportation. So they connect roads to railroads, roads to an airport, to ports as well. Quite often, the location where you have a connector from a train close to the port, it's not necessarily right at the port. So there is a displacement from the connector from that location all the way to the truck. And so the truck plays this role of interconnecting the other modes of transportation as a whole. The truck is also very important for consumption. I mean, trains will never stop at a supermarket. A ship is not going to moor at a pharmacy, and a plane is not going to land in a shopping mall. And so the truck plays this very important role of doing this distribution between urban points. And this is something that's going to happen for a long time. We've been following different projects at a national level, but we cannot really see yet in a more efficient manner an integrated vision of all of this. I mean, there's been major achievements in terms of infrastructure, in privatization of a lot of infrastructure, even in states that have more privileged road infrastructure, such as in the southeast of Brazil. What we see that's missing is a lot. This is a global debate that's also important that's going on. We'll never be able to overcome this because production and consumption is growing at a quicker rate than humanity is capable of providing the growth in infrastructure. It sounds strange, but that's how it works. I mean, infrastructure are heavy projects, mid or long-term projects, and consumption has variable growth. Seasonality, it's a lot quicker. A great example to illustrate this seasonality is, for example, now this race towards a vaccine in 2021. 2021 will be the vaccine race. People wanting to be immunized, to take the vaccine. But in order for this to happen, behind these dynamics, we have a production and logistics process that's very complex. Raw materials in the factories that will produce the vaccines, and then once the vaccines need to be packaged and filled, and then distribution to the entire planet. And so there will be a huge production of vaccines, and there'll be a huge need for logistics and transportation that's totally off the curve, where our industry and other industries as well aren't prepared for these exponential and quick peaks. And so infrastructure is not able to follow along. A couple of times I was with some of our colleagues at the American Trucking Association in the United States, and one of the major criticism we hear from them is that there's infrastructure missing in the U.S. You may be asking yourselves, wow, in the U.S. with those wonderful highways, and there are tolls, there are a few tolls, less tolls in the U.S., and the tolls are cheaper, but they complain about the lack of infrastructure on U.S. roads. Why? Because of the size of the economy and the size of the country. It's so huge, the volume of consumption and production, that infrastructure just can't keep the pace. And so you need planning that contemplates all of these situations, understanding production, understanding consumption, understanding the type of product and how these operations work, and adapt the most efficient mode of transportation in order to meet these needs. While we don't do this, unfortunately, this debate in our industry in road cargo transportation, where freight is low, people always complain, freight is too low. and then freight forwarders complaining that freight is too high. This debate will never end. I mean, intermodals are not playing their specific functions, let's say. We need to have a debate around this issue, not only complaining. I think it's our mission as the business community to help the government to understand all of these issues. It's our mission as leadership in different entities to unify the thoughts of our business community to seek a better understanding amongst all of us. Of course, we do this work every day, but it's important that the business community work with us. They work with different entities, their trade unions, their federations, associations, so that we can come up with more efficient proposals, so that the National Confederation of Transportation or even NTC Logistics can have technical content in order to take these demands, these requirements to government. When I say government, we need to work hand in hand and forget the issue of political parties and this polarization that we're going through. We need to work next to those that have been elected. If that politician was elected, it's because that's what the people wanted. And that's what we need to do. We need to be next to them in order to help them to improve our daily activities. So that's a very important message that I would like to share with all of my friends and colleagues. I hope this was clear that I just shared with you now. Okay, Taiguara, thank you very much for your talk. So based on everything that you mentioned during your talk, I have a question here for you in terms of what you said and the importance of multimodality. What do we still need for better planning that's led by the government so that multimodality can, in fact, take place and make cargo logistics more efficient? This question, why we don't have effective planning, that's a great question. Of course, we see the current government on behalf of Minister Tarcísio doing some brilliant work in terms of infrastructure. I've been closely following the presentations of the Ministry of Transportation, and I see that, we're watching the birth of a way to create this plan, so this plan could be more efficient and more effective. But we need more than that. We need to sit down and do everything that I mentioned and understand better. And by region, I mentioned about agribusiness, but there are hundreds and thousands of other industries that need to be contemplated. Like, for example, industry, transformation industry, the automobile industry, textile industry, industry that produces our food, food production, technological equipment, very strong in some regions in Brazil. You have furniture, footwear, so many sectors, so many industries that are usually regionalized. And it's interesting to understand the characteristics of this production, how the raw materials arrive at these factories, these plants, how the finished products leave them and reaching the end consumer. And a huge study that needs to be done with new technology. This has grown a lot in Brazil, and e-commerce, for example, with many logistics challenges. And so what's missing, it's difficult to say why we still do not have a plan, an effective plan, but we've been seeing political will on behalf of the government, from the federal government, and also we've been following the state governments here in the state of São Paulo. I have a great relationship with the state government and the Secretariat of Transportation Logistics, where I'm part of the Secretariat. The infrastructure projects are growing. The interconnection, the connectors are being debated extensively. There is a huge debate, actually, to obtain funding for these multimodal connectors that should and could also be operated privately. And so I think we're on the right track. What we cannot have is every 4 years this changes because the government changes. I think it's our commitment as the business community and the whole industry to maintain this plan to deliver something more efficient to all of Brazil. Perfect, Itaiguara. Now, you mentioned that in your trips abroad, you've seen, and we've heard this more and more, about autonomous deliveries by drones, autonomous vehicles, etc. Technology now applied in roads and in cargo transportation and logistics. How do you evaluate these trends, especially here for Brazil? And what do you think is possible to be implemented here in our country? Well, as I mentioned, cargo transportation and logistics is one of the industries of the future. There are major opportunities for Brazil for infrastructure. To say that our infrastructure is no good, that means opportunities, the supply and construction of new infrastructure, but specifically talking about transportation of the future. I see a very promising future, a very bright future for our industry. Of course, new technology is here with autonomous vehicles. That is a reality, actually, mid and long-term reality, but it is a reality that's coming. Personally, I was in the labs of universities such as Stanford, their development lab for autonomous vehicles, and I saw firsthand these autonomous technologies. I was in the factory Otto that made that Budweiser truck, 100% autonomous. I was personally there talking to the founder. It was excellent talk. It's as if I was talking to Santos Dumont of the future. Autonomous trucks, autonomous vehicles today, they're a lot more intelligent than a human driver. There's a lot of technology. They cross data. It makes it a lot more efficient. A mobility of autonomous vehicles, we're going to have the need for intelligent infrastructure. So intelligent highways, intelligent roads that communicate with the vehicle. The vehicle communicates with the highway. This is not science fiction. This is not futurology. This is science. It's reality. It's actually starting to happen in some of the main countries. One of the hurdles in order for this to take off really is a more efficient network of data communication. 5G is around the corner to meet this demand. 5G vehicles will be able to communicate in a more efficient and quick manner with roads and between them as well. So there's a huge capacity of circulation that's guaranteeing safety and security for those that are in the vehicles. We see major technology, for example, of automation of convoys or auto platooning, as it's known. This happens for trucks, all of them manned by a truck driver. I think a driver will be, just like a pilot in an aircraft, perhaps doing other things. But in the case of the convoy, 4 trucks, each one with their own trucks, when they position, they match systems, they synchronize the system as a whole, and the front driver, leads, and the ones that are behind only monitor. And each truck, and I've seen this technology, each truck has inside AI equipment that calculates, for example, the power and weight for the proper braking, how much they need to brake, how much the first truck is going to brake, the second, the third, and the last truck need to brake, or vice versa. When the driver at the front accelerates, each truck will know with a variable of weight how much they need to accelerate or brake. There are intelligent camera systems that are wonderful. They're functioning really well. They already detect situations, and they're a lot quicker than the human eye, for example, And this already happens today. This technology is already available, embedded in many trucks, including Brazil, new trucks that are arriving in Brazil. These are trucks that use intelligent cameras. So that's how I see the future. The future will be so integrated. We'll have so much information and data from equipment, IoT, sensors everywhere, that we're going to wake up in the morning. The system will know that you're waking up, that you're getting up, and that you're brushing your teeth. The system will know that you're having breakfast and reading the newspaper, and you're ready to leave. And since the agenda is integrated, they know you're going from point A to point B, and you're going to take 40 minutes, for example. We'll also know that perhaps you didn't have such a great night. So when you open up the door, there'll be an autonomous vehicle waiting for you with a bed, perhaps, so that you can rest during these 40 minutes. And same thing with cargo transportation. We're going to have a lot more automation between collection and delivery, a lot more data in order for our clients to be more efficient, to provide better services, and integrate in production and follow production of this vehicle inside the assembly line. Basically the way it happens today with just-in-time, but we'll be able to automate all of this. We'll be able to have a greater predictability. So get ready, everyone. Get ready, because we're in the industry of the future.
Okay, so let's continue with our panel. And now I'd like to invite to give us his talk, Arlan Rodrigues, President of the Cargo Transportation Trade Union from Paraíba, also President for North-Northeast, who's going to talk to us about the importance of cargo transportation during the pandemic, COVID-19. So welcome, Mr. President. You have the floor. Initially, I would like to thank Expolog for the invitation to be able to participate in this panel on behalf of our President Clovis Nogueira. I would like to thank all those that are organizing the event. I would also like to greet my colleagues here on this panel. And just to say that I would like to share with you a little bit of what has happened, what's still to happen, and what is happening right now with road transportation industry and logistics industry as a whole in Brazil. This very strange year, a year where all sectors and industries have had to adapt themselves on the fly. It's a new moment. We have to replan, rethink our investments, and the transportation industry hasn't been any different. And together with this, the fact that we're talking about an industry that didn't stop during 1 second during the pandemic, because we're talking about an essential service, as was decided by the federal government and all of the state governments in Brazil. And so our sector played its role as an essential service, a very important role in supply chain, especially for medication, food, guaranteeing delivery on people's tables, stores that were still open, what is essential for human lives, for all of Brazilians. And so the first evaluation, the first assessment is very positive in the sense that we are playing this role of supply, which is extremely important for activity. Now, of course, some sectors, some industries have even had greater demand. For example, e-commerce, the companies that work with e-commerce during the pandemic have had to hire people, acquire vehicles,
companies that work with food and beverage, construction material, pharmacies, hospital equipment, medication. So all of these industries have had the participation of transportation in their supply. Now, during March to July, our National Association of Cargo Transportation and Logistics, we every 15 days we did a survey to try and measure what was the impact of the throughput in different sectors, in different industries in our economy, and regarding cargo. So the results were very useful for companies. NTC did some live streams every 15 days to analyze the results. And as a result of all of this, we have an idea of the scenario of what really has happened to the economy in Brazil as a whole, because our sector is still responsible for 68% of all cargo throughput in Brazil. And so we're a thermometer, if you will, of how the economy is going. And at the end, this type of research, of course, sometimes it can go down, and at a peak period can drop even more. But on average, we identified a retraction in the transportation market of around 28 to 30%. This was the general average, if you will, during these 6 or 7 months of pandemic. Of course, some sectors, some industries, different from this average. Some sectors even growing more because commerce or trade, this demand would go down, this level would go down to 28%, for example. But the fact is that generally speaking, the drop was 30%. Of course, this greatly impacted business. On the other hand, I think there was a major mistake from the car makers that stopped their production. There were some layoffs, and so there was a lack of supply in the market, and consequently created a consumption bubble because the companies that needed to add to their fleet the fleet was just not available. This, of course, created a consumption bubble, as it were. And with the supply market totally not ready to meet this demand. Now, another factor is that we saw quite clearly as a consequence of this atypical moment, an increase in raw materials. People started to consume more food, buy online, and this generated a lack of supply in raw materials. When I talk about raw materials, I'm talking about car parts, tires, and many makers reduced their production, and with production reduced, there's still great difficulty, for example, to find basic inputs such as tires, parts, components. especially when we talk about vehicles. This has come at a moment, this was aggravated actually, because the sector already had been going through a crisis. And so the fleet is getting older. And now there's no supply. So really, it's a scenario of lack of supply with the need to renew our fleets. And, this is what alerts us for all of us to do our homework in the sense planning well for 2021. We hope that there will be a stabilization in supply. We hope that the vaccine will finally arrive in Brazil and will perhaps put an end to lockdowns. In some states in Brazil, lockdown is imminent. The federal government won't be able to maintain, the federal government cannot deal with a crisis like this during a long time. We're aware of this. Consumption during the pandemic is really due to a lot of help from the federal government, the aid programs for the population and for companies. And of course, we know that if a second wave hits, the federal government won't be able to maintain all of these programs up and running. The country could perhaps have economic collapse, and that would be a lot worse than the pandemic itself. So we hope that starting from next year, we'll have a market at normal levels, a market that can meet the needs, the supply needs, especially in the automobile sector. And something else that's worth mentioning is that this need and supply elevated the price of vehicles to a level that, in my opinion, is just unfeasible. And during the pandemic, vehicles, the automakers, they went through a readjustment for consumers, more than 20% readjustment. And of course, the tariffs can't take that readjustment, that increased tires as well, parts and components. The main components became more expensive during the pandemic due to this lack of supply from suppliers. And this is an equation that we, transportation companies, we're going to have to live with this, for this next year. Of course, we hope that everything will go back to normal. We don't expect prices to go down. What has gone up is going to remain up or even increase a little bit more. And we hope that at least it'll stabilize, will plateau. I think our associations like ANTT and CNT, Fetranslog, spearheaded by President Clovis, the trade unions, have also played a very important role negotiating with state governments, be it at a federal level through CNT, negotiating with the federal government, helping authorities to understand the importance of our sector,
And at this moment, it was clearly seen that we have a representation that's quite present, almost like a watchdog, if you will, that helped us a lot, that helped the entire sector to overcome these very difficult moments, critical moments, March all the way to July, August, more or less. And so, of course, I can say that the companies that got prepared, even during the pandemic, that invested in their people, that invested in new technology, that have tried to penetrate new markets, markets already mentioned, these companies will definitely have a greater possibility of overcoming the effects, the negative effects caused by this entire situation that we're going through in the whole world. But generally speaking, we can say with total certainty that the transportation industry is prepared so that in 2021, we can meet the needs of the population. Like a slogan created during the crisis, the pandemic stopped the world, but didn't stop the transportation sector. And so the transportation sector, the road cargo transportation industry is ready for 2021 to meet all the needs of the Brazilian people. Great. Excellent. As always, a very realistic talk. Now, in terms of what you talked to us, I have a couple of questions. As far as you see it, I know that you can't foresee the future, but do you think the economy is going to come back? You think demand will increase for transportation companies in 2021? Now, regarding this question, about the future, what's going to happen next year, 2021, and demand, we know that generally speaking, the world is in the hands of a vaccine. I mean, if there's a new lockdown, for example, or if there are new lockdowns, as we see partial lockdowns in Europe, of course, we will have the same scenario that I already mentioned, where the transportation sector will suffer dire consequences. But fully aware that in any scenario, this sector will be ready to meet the needs, just like it happened during the lockdown of most of our economic activities this year in 2020. So the expectation is that we won't have new lockdowns and that the economy can effectively stabilize and create a scenario, a more favorable scenario for all segments of our economy. Right. Thank you. According to your opinion, you think the transportation sector was one of the industry that was most impacted, positively or negatively? Now, as far as the impacts are concerned, the impacts that the transportation sector suffered during the pandemic, we can say that there were positive impacts, especially in those companies that work with many of those sectors or industries that I've already mentioned, like food and beverage, e-commerce. So these companies had a very positive impact for sure. However, on the other side, the other segments, other sectors that work, such as shopping malls, brick and mortar, the impacts were greater, were more negative than these other sectors. And so since the transportation sector is very segmented, and that's why the NTC survey tries to measure exactly these different impacts in a segmented manner. But as I've already mentioned, the general impact, the overall impact was negative, of course, around 28 to 30%. And so we're at the end of this panel number 4 from Expolog, Road Transportation Challenges, Integration of Modes of Transportation. On behalf of Expolog, I would like to thank the presence of everyone. I'd like to thank our audience and invite you to continue participating in other panels and sessions, and check out the Expolog virtual exhibition. Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure to be here with all of you at this very special moment. Thank you.